So the ovarian and the uterine cycles now. Alright, we know what the ovarian cycle is, a cycle that takes place in the ovary. And the uterine cycle is a cycle that the uterus goes through. That makes sense. That's self-explanatory. Right? So the ovarian cycle, that's what we're gonna go through first. So the ovarian cycle is a complex series of events that occurs in the ovaries of females, typically over a 28-day period. Notice that these are generally ranges, So each person is different. Probably somebody's cycle could be 22 days, somebody's cycle could be 30 days. Some person's cycle do not come because of endometriosis or by other causes. Cycles change. Right? I mean, the endometriosis would be from the uterine cycle. But you have different types of stuff that may happen. Probably menstruation decides not to happen this month and then decide to happen next month. Right? There are many things that can happen, right? But usually, typically, it's a 28-day period every single 28 days. Right? It consists of several distinct phases which are characterized by specific hormone changes and physiological events. Right? So let's look at the step-to-step rundown of the ovarian cycle. So we start off here with the menstrual phase. Generally from 1 to 5 days, right? From day 1 to day 5, we have hormonal changes here. Now I broke them up into hormonal changes and physiological events. Because some people have problem like linking the two. So I literally just bullet them. Right? Yeah, so 1 to 5 or 7. See, you guys would know that it varies depending on who we're talking about, right? So at the beginning of the cycle, levels of estrogen and progesterone are low. So menstruation occurs, characterized by the shedding of the uterine lining, the endometrium itself, in response to the decreased levels of estrogen and progesterone from the previous cycle. Alright? Day 1 to day 13, it kind of overlaps here. We're going to have follicle-stimulating hormone being secreted by the anterior pituitary gland, stimulating the growth and development of ovarian follicles. As follicles develop, they secrete estrogen. Right? So what's happening now? Ovarian follicles begin to grow and develop in response to FSH. Right? As follicles mature. Because it's FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, therefore it stimulates the follicle to grow. Everybody should know that. Right? As the follicles mature, they produce increased amounts of estrogen. The rising levels of estrogen stimulates the thickening of the endometrium in preparation for the potential implantation of the fertilized egg. So somebody told me that progesterone was to thicken the endometrium. Progesterone maintains the thickness on the endometrium, right? It maintains it. Okay? So I have that there. Ovulation at day 14, right? Hormonal changes now. Midway through the cycle, a surge of luteinizing hormone is triggered by the rising estrogen levels, right? This surge in luteinizing hormone triggers ovulation, right? The release of a mature secondary oocyte from the dominant follicle, or what we call the Graafian follicle, right? Physiological event now, the mature egg is now released from the ovary into the fallopian tube where it may be fertilized by a sperm. Ovulation typically occurs around day 14 of the cycle. This is typically, it's a range, alright? Luteal phase now, from day 15 to day 28. Hormonal changes now following ovulation. The empty follicle transforms into the structure called the corpus luteum. And we know that the corpus luteum will further disintegrate into the corpus albicans, right? So the corpus luteum secretes progesterone and estrogen, which maintain the thickening of the endometrium, right? And prepare it for the potential implantation of fertilized egg. Now, if fertilization doesn't occur, the corpus luteum begins to degrade towards the end of the luteal phase. As levels of progesterone and estrogen decline, the endometrium is no longer maintained, leading to the breakdown and the onset of menstruation, right? Making the start of a new cycle. So that's the cycle, right? So let's look at it. We have a primordial follicle, right? And it develops into a primary ovum, right? It's a primary follicle, right? Primary follicle and the primary ovum in the middle. Primary oocyte, right? That is going to grow and develop through the surge of follicle stimulating hormone stimulating the growth of the follicle. So notice the follicle is now growing and developing into this huge Graafian follicle, right? A mature follicle, a Graafian follicle with a secondary oocyte now embedded in it. No, what is going to happen? There's going to be a surge of luteinizing hormone because of the increase of estrogen that the ovary is producing, right? And now it's going to be ejected via ovulation. So the liberation of the ovum is going to be ovulation from the ruptured follicle. The ruptured follicle now becomes an early corpus luteum and then develops fully into the corpus luteum. It's going to start to produce progesterone along with estrogen to maintain the lining of the endometrium, because ovulation just occurs. So it wants to maintain the lining preparation. But let's say now that the egg that they await and oh no, the sperm not find it, right? So no fertilization happen, right? It's gonna now disintegrate into the corpus albicans, which continues the production of estrogen, but progesterone production actually plummets. So both actually plummet, you know, right? But progesterone more so than estrogen, and progesterone is a hormone that maintains the lining of the endometrium. So what's gonna happen is that both the secondary oocyte and the endometrium will actually be sloughed off, broken down, and passed out in the process of menstruation, right? So remember, primary follicle and primary oocyte, then secondary follicle, secondary ovum, right, or secondary oocyte and the Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle ruptures in ovulation, releasing the secondary oocyte. Then the ruptured follicle becomes the corpus luteum, and then the corpus luteum degrades into the corpus albicans. The follicular phase, right, starts from the primordial follicle to the developed follicle, right, the Graafian follicle. The luteal phase is generally from the Graafian follicle to ovulation. No, ovulation phase is from the Graafian follicle ovulation, and the luteal phase is from the ruptured follicle coming straight up to the corpus albicans, right? So if you guys want me to do this, let me do it. Let me get a pen. So here is really the follicular phase. Here is the ovulation phase. So this is the O phase, ovulation, right? And then here now is the luteal phase. All right. Let's have a go on now, right? So this is another look at it. The granulosa cells. It's a different look at it. All right. So remember when we're talking about the granulosa cells of the corona radiata, right? The granulosa cells actually develop around the oocyte, and it's a part of the follicle. And when ovulation occurs, it actually takes a part of the Graafian follicle, some of the granulosa cells, it takes it with them, right? And it becomes the corona radiata, right? So that's what's happening there. That's how we get the corona radiata. It's a piece of the Graafian follicle that it takes with it. We can call it the corpus hemorrhagicum though, but just call it the ruptured follicle at this point. I don't want to be saying corpus hemorrhagicum. Like just hemorrhages, it breaks it, whatever. Alright, so that's it for that. For the uterine cycle now. Wait, are there any questions here? Any questions or concerns for me?